King John of England, a name whispered with disdain, forever linked to tyranny and failure. History remembers him as John Lackland, a ruler who lost vast territories and plunged England into chaos. He is the monarch who surrendered to the demands of his barons, signing the Magna Carta, a document often seen as the cornerstone of English liberty. But is this portrayal entirely accurate? Was King John truly the villain history paints him to be? Or is he a misunderstood figure, a product of his time and circumstances? This essay delves into the life and reign of King John, exploring both his notorious reputation and the complexities that challenge this simplistic view. Through examining his tumultuous upbringing, his political maneuvers, and the events that led to the creation of the Magna Carta, we aim to unravel the enigma of King John and understand his place in English history. Was he a villain, a tyrant who brought England to its knees? Or was he a victim of circumstance, a ruler burdened by the sins of his predecessors and the challenges of his era? Join us as we journey back in time to uncover the untold story of England's most notorious monarch, King John. Born in 1166, John was the youngest son of King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. His lineage placed him firmly within the House of Plantagenet, a powerful dynasty that ruled over England and vast territories in France. However, John's early years were far from the idyllic upbringing expected of a prince. Henry II's reign was marked by internal strife and rebellion, often fueled by his own sons who vied for power and influence. John, the youngest and seemingly least favored, grew up amidst this tumultuous backdrop. He witnessed firsthand the treachery and ambition that festered within the royal court. These early experiences undoubtedly shaped John's character and worldview. The constant power struggles within his family instilled in him a sense of cunning and a ruthless pragmatism. He learned to navigate the treacherous waters of courtly politics, forging alliances and exploiting weaknesses to secure his own position. However, these survival instincts, honed in the crucible of a dysfunctional family, would later manifest as ruthlessness and paranoia during his reign. John's path to kingship was paved with the misfortunes and missteps of his elder brothers. As the youngest son, he was initially not in line for the throne. His elder brothers, Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey, were expected to rule before him. However, fate had other plans. Henry the young king, crowned as his father's successor, died of dysentery in 1183. Geoffrey died in a tournament accident in 1186. This left Richard, a formidable warrior known as Richard the Lionheart, as heir apparent. Upon Henry II's death in 1189, Richard ascended to the throne. John's relationship with Richard was complex and fraught with tension. While Richard was away on the Third Crusade, John conspired with their French rivals to usurp the throne. Richard's eventual return and John's subsequent forgiveness cemented a fragile truce between the brothers. Upon Richard's death in 1199, John finally ascended to the throne of England. However, the kingdom he inherited was vastly different from the one his father had ruled. Richard's constant wars and extravagant lifestyle had drained the royal treasury. Moreover, the Angevin Empire, a vast swathe of territory stretching from England to the Pyrenees, was under threat from the resurgent French monarchy. John's military campaigns in France proved disastrous. He suffered a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Bouvines in 1214, losing control of Normandy and Anjou. This loss not only diminished English prestige on the continent, but also severely weakened John's position back home. To finance his failing wars, John resorted to exorbitant taxation, further alienating his already disgruntled barons. He imposed heavy scutages, feudal payments in lieu of military service, even in the absence of war. He exploited his feudal rights, demanding exorbitant sums for the marriages of his wards and the inheritance of estates. These actions created a climate of resentment and rebellion, setting the stage for a major confrontation between the king and his subjects. Section 5. A clash of wills, King John versus the barons and the church. John's reign was not only marked by military defeats and financial mismanagement, but also by a series of conflicts with the church and his own barons. His autocratic tendencies and disregard for traditional feudal customs alienated even his most loyal supporters. John's conflict with the papacy began in 1205 over the appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury. John refused to accept Pope Innocent III's chosen candidate. leading to a bitter dispute that resulted in England being placed under interdict. This meant that religious services were suspended and the sacraments were denied to the English people. The interdict, coupled with John's oppressive rule, fueled growing unrest among the English barons. They resented his arbitrary taxation, his disregard for their feudal privileges, and his abuse of royal power. In 1215, a group of powerful barons, led by Robert Fitzwalter, rose up in rebellion against the king. Section 6, the Great Charter, Magna Carta, and its enduring significance. With his kingdom on the brink of civil war, John was forced to negotiate with the rebellious barons. The two sides met at Runnymede, a meadow near Windsor Castle, in June 1215. Under duress, John agreed to a set of demands that became known as Magna Carta, or the Great Charter. Magna Carta was not a revolutionary document. It did not establish a democratic system or abolish feudalism. Instead, it was a conservative document rooted in feudal law and custom. Its primary aim was to limit the king's power and protect the rights and privileges of the barons. However, Magna Carta contained several clauses that had far-reaching implications for the development of English law and government. It established the principle that the king was not above the law and that he could not impose taxes without the consent of his barons. It also guaranteed certain basic rights to all freemen, such as the right to a fair trial and protection from arbitrary imprisonment. Section 7. The King's Demise, Death, Legacy, and the Repercussions of Rebellion. Although John had agreed to the terms of Magna Carta, he had no intention of honoring it. He appealed to Pope Innocent III, who declared the charter invalid. England plunged back into civil war. However, John's reign was coming to an end. In October 1216, while marching north to confront his enemies, he contracted dysentery and died at Newark Castle. He was succeeded by his 9-year-old son, Henry III. John's death did little to resolve the crisis that had gripped England during his reign. The Civil War continued for several years, with the barons eventually securing a decisive victory. Magna Carta, though repeatedly reissued and amended, became a cornerstone of English law and a symbol of the limitations on royal power. John left behind a mixed legacy. He was remembered as a tyrant and a failure, responsible for the loss of English territories in France and the turmoil that had engulfed his kingdom. However, he was also, albeit unintentionally, a catalyst for significant legal and political developments. The Magna Carta, forced upon him by his rebellious barons, became a cornerstone of English liberty and a document that would resonate throughout history. Section 8. John's unintended legacy, a catalyst for constitutionalism. While John's reign was undoubtedly marked by conflict and turmoil, his unintended contribution to the development of English law and governance cannot be overlooked. The Magna Carta, though initially intended to safeguard the privileges of the barons, set in motion a series of events that would ultimately reshape the relationship between the monarchy and the governed. The principles enshrined in the Magna Carta, particularly the idea that even the king was subject to the law, laid the groundwork for the concept of constitutionalism. This idea, that the power of the ruler should be limited and defined by a set of fundamental laws, would have profound and lasting implications for English history, and indeed for the development of democratic ideals across the globe. Furthermore, John's reign highlighted the importance of a strong and unified baronial class. The barons' successful rebellion against John demonstrated that even a king could not rule effectively without the support of his most powerful subjects. This realization would contribute to the development of Parliament, a legislative body that would eventually evolve into a crucial check on royal power. Section 9. Conclusion, Reassessing King John, Villain or Misunderstood Ruler. King John remains a controversial figure in English history. He was undoubtedly a flawed ruler, prone to cruelty, treachery, and poor judgment. His military blunders, financial mismanagement, and tyrannical tendencies led to rebellion and ultimately tarnished his legacy. However, it is essential to avoid simplistic judgments and recognize the complexities of his reign. John inherited a kingdom already burdened by financial strain and facing significant external threats. He was a product of his time, raised in a world where power was often seized and maintained through ruthless means. While he may not have been a great king, John was undoubtedly a significant one. His reign witnessed the birth of the Magna Carta, a document that would have a lasting impact on the development of English law and government. The principles of limited government and individual rights, though initially intended to benefit a select few, would eventually resonate far beyond the confines of the 13th century. In reassessing King John, it is crucial to acknowledge both his failings and his unintended contributions to history. He was neither a hero nor a monster, but a complex figure whose reign, marked by conflict and crisis, ultimately paved the way for a new era in English governance.